Hello, and welcome to the Teaching and Learning Resources section of this graduate teaching assistant orientation. My name is Sandy Schaefer. I'm with the Fogelman College of Business and Economics here at the university, where I do a variety of things related to student success that involve teaching, supporting our faculty who teach and their use of technology and instructional design, and also work with the Dean's Office in terms of quality of learning and accreditation related activities. So I'm going to spend the next little while sharing with you some ideas I have about teaching and teaching online and using the technology resources that we have here on our campus. I've been working here since 2002, where I've been involved in the campus-wide efforts to move online and to help faculty learn how to use technology. Were we to be meeting face to face, which is how I normally teach this workshop, but this time we're doing it online, but if we were meeting face to face, I would probably have the group of you all in front of me, and I would throw a couple of challenge questions at you. The first thing I'd do is ask you to think about the fact that you're teaching this full semester college level class for the first time in your life, and I imagine most of you are. I would probably have asked you to raise your hands, and most of the hands in the rooms would go up yes if I asked you if it was your first time. I would challenge you to think about what it is you want to accomplish, and then we'd have a discussion about it. I would suggest that you think about that right now as you're going through this material by yourself, is maybe make a few notes of what is it you want to accomplish as a teacher in this activity in this upcoming year or semester. And also another question I would ask you is to go back and think about when you were an undergraduate student. What were some things that you would do to describe either a very good class or you might call it a great class? Also, what are some of the attributes of a poor class or a bad class? And I'm sure you had both. I had both. And what you want to do is try to do as many great class things as you can and try to avoid some of those bad class experiences as a teacher. I know that's what I've worked on doing. One of the things we're going to encourage you to do is to be not just a teacher, but a very successful teacher. And one metric of being successful as a teacher, particularly at a school like the University of Memphis, is to what extent do we keep students from dropping out? And you may say, oh, that's a low risk. Well, it's actually not a low risk, particularly at a school like ours where we have many first generation students or students that are working one, two, sometimes three jobs. So the things that we do and the activities that we engage in as teachers are vital to helping those students stay connected and following through on their learning experience. And I hope to cover some of that in these lessons today. Well, there are a variety of reasons that professional educators and those who research education have studied this idea of student dropout or disconnection or fail or various attributes of not being successful. And some of those things that they've identified are students might feel isolated or frustrated or disconnected. Sometimes the technology doesn't work, and that can be very frustrating. I'm sure you've experienced that, and you may experience it as a teacher. Not being able to contact with their faculty member in an online environment, which many of you will be doing in this current environment, they will need to connect with you. It's not an isolated activity, so they feel alone. Um, if you don't participate in the discussions at any level, if you just don't participate or engage yourselves, that has been identified as a reason that students will feel disconnected. If you don't give them clear instructions or direction or expectations, if you're kind of murky and muddled in what you expect, they will feel lost themselves and they can easily become disconnected. And if you don't have any kind of social interaction either between you and the students or among the students themselves. So these are things we want to avoid. So let's talk about some of the things you can do to be a very effective teacher. Well, let's start out by focusing on what we call engaged learning. And NSSE, or the National Survey of Student Engagement, is something that higher education researchers at the national level do year in and year out, and they're constantly trying to find out what matters to students. And in that area of engaged learning, here were 5 key attributes of engaged learning that they identified. First, that the learning that you deliver is relevant, that they feel they can connect to it, it's relevant to them personally or professionally, and some of your students will already be working students. That the learning that you put together for them is transferable in some way, that they can apply it. It's not too totally abstract. The more concrete you can make some of the learning, the more likely they are to feel engaged with it. They can relate to it. If you can make it participatory, so they can share in their learning experience in some way, and there's lots of ways you can do that. But let them be active, and that word active, and have an active role in their learning, that's extremely important. If they're just passively receiving information that you dump on them, that's not very engaged, and they can feel bored and disconnected. Think about some of the classes you've been in where you weren't allowed to participate. It's easy to sort of tune out the whole experience. Collaborative learning can be a very social thing, and the more you can let students learn together, the more engaged they're going to be, and the more fun they're going to have, and the more they're going to teach each other, and the easier your job is as an instructor. Challenging. So if you can make the word challenging, they're going to engage with it better. You're going to make them motivated. And the more motivated they are, the more likely they are to work towards some challenging, but you need to make sure achievable goal. And these are all things, and there are other attributes, but these are 5 key ones that you can think about as you're designing your learning. So if you want to become a superior college teacher, not just a college teacher, but a superior one, here are some areas that you can focus on. First off, from a mechanical standpoint, just be organized, be prepared. When you walk into the classroom or put together that online class, make sure it's well organized and you're well prepared. Day in and day out, within the material, and when you show up. Make sure also that you have good command of the subject matter. There's a presumption that as a graduate student you know your material, but you will probably be asked to teach some things that you may not be as familiar with as you like. Make sure you just brush up on it. In all likelihood, that won't be a big challenge. What are some behaviors that you can exhibit to be a superior college teacher? Well, make sure you communicate clearly, and that's in writing, verbally, however you communicate. Make sure that it's very clear. Make sure that you're enthusiastic. They'll pick up on your energy level. Make sure that you engage with the students. We've already talked about that engagement. Make sure that they feel that you're part of the learning experience, that you're connected with them. Also make sure that you're flexible and creative. Things happen, things change. Calendars change. Sometimes we have to go home. Sometimes people get sick. Things happen. Be as flexible and creative as you can. In the area of emotional connectivity, make sure that you show personal interest in your students' needs. They're human beings. They're anxious, they're nervous, particularly undergraduate students early in their studies really need someone who cares about them. If they sense that you care, that will help them a great deal. Exhibit sound character, and this is just be honest, be straightforward. Try not to be somebody other than who you are. They pick up on that. And lastly, just make sure that you're committed to teaching. This is hard work and it's important, and they'll pick up on it. They'll know if you're committed. What are some techniques that can help increase learning? Well, certainly time on task. How long somebody works on something. Think about how you practice anything and become good at it. An instrument, an athletic endeavor, artistic work, whatever it is you're working on, the more time on task that they spend, the greater they're going to take away and the more they're going to learn from it. Make sure that you give them a variety of different things to do and different ways of presenting concepts. Activities that promote reflection and self-monitoring of understanding. Well, that's a mouthful, but it basically is give them a way to reflect on the material in their own way. Instead of you just dumping on them and saying memorize it this way, give them a chance to respond back on how did they process the material, what did they take away from it. I even go so far as to let my students write first-person essays on how they felt about an activity or a learning experience. And I even do that in information technology courses because that's a different way of thinking about it. So let them self-reflect. It's usually easy for them to write that way as well. Give them things that are interesting and fun. Seems almost self-evident, but we can fall into the trap of giving them mechanical things that are not interesting and not fun, that are boring and mechanical. Avoid that. Give them a variety of different scenarios. Let them pick out a topic to work on. Give them some role in that so it'll become more interesting to them. And then certainly they need feedback from you. That's your role as an instructor. They do some work you ask them to do. They present it back to you. You need to give them feedback on that. And it needs to be honest, it needs to be effective, and it needs to be to them in a timely manner so that they can use it to remain successful in the class. What are some things you might avoid? Well, too much work or too little work. Too much dependency on objective tests, multiple choice, true, false. Give them some things that are more rich and engaging. Don't give them boring work. It sounds like we're repeating ourselves, but I can't say it enough. Make it interesting. Don't be boring. They will pick up on fun stuff, and you'll have a much easier time if you give them fun stuff to work on. Try not to rely on gimmicks or too much media. You may think it's fun to throw in a bunch of media. Unless it's really serving a learning purpose, no point in doing it. Again, this sounds like we're repeating ourselves, but you need to show commitment to the learning experience. You're all in this together. You and the students, both parties, you and the classroom. They need to see that you're committed to it. And again, don't give them confusing or disorganized material. Make sure you're well organized. That's all that preparation we've talked about. What are some other good things that you can do? Well, it's okay to admit an error. Be human. I make mistakes, you'll make mistakes. Don't try to hide it or cover it up. They'll pick up on it. That's part of that character we talked about. And that helps them connect with you. Give them a chance to play around in the material. And I like to use the visual metaphor of children playing in a sandbox. When you see a bunch of small kids playing in a sandbox, they can stay busy all afternoon, and you don't have to tell them what to do. Give your students a chance to play around in their material, whatever it is you're putting in front of them, and they'll stay engaged in it, and they'll take more away. And your work will be less that way. Encourage them to show individual curiosity. There's all sorts of ways you can do that, but the more curious they are about the material, the more they're going to engage with it. There will be times when you need to be direct. Maybe a student is asking to deal with late work, or they're giving you some difficulty about keeping up with stuff, or there's questions about what's due and when. You're still driving the class, and sometimes you have to be very direct. So be direct, give them clarity. You'll know when to do that. And above all, you need to just be you, be honest. That's part of that character thing we've been talking about. So let's recap some of the key takeaways from this initial unit on being an effective teacher. First and foremost, if you keep the students engaged, then you will keep them connected to your class. They will have fun with the material. You'll get good work from them. Your job will be easier. And best of all, you'll keep them moving towards success as a student, which is not just passing this one course that you're teaching, but helping them be successful students overall and staying active and engaged and successful towards graduation. That's what's really important. And you can do that in this course, in any course that you're teaching. Secondly, from a mechanical standpoint, as you are developing new courses, just simply make sure that they're well organized and that the things that you have embedded in this course reflect the best practices that you can find in teaching. I have some ideas in this unit that I've shared with you, but by no means are these the be-all and end-all list of effective teaching techniques. Do your own homework. It's not hard to do. Talk to others, learn from other faculty, learn from your own experiences. Sometimes you can even ask the students, but continue to develop your teaching techniques so that you're putting forth the best teaching that you can do, and that will help you and that will help your students. At a personal level, make sure that you're reflecting those attributes that you want your students to develop. That might be curiosity, commitment to the material, commitment to your course, commitment as being a student, and individual integrity. And these are all things that you need to role model for your students, and they will certainly pick up on that and reflect it back to you in their experience as students. There are some major pitfalls that you can fall into, disorganized courses, boring material, too much, too little material, etc. and so forth. It's not hard to identify things that can make for a poor course experience. look at yourself and look at the way you're teaching and make sure you avoid those. And lastly, you want to make sure that you have fun being a teacher. It's easy to become intimidated by this. Once you do a good job of developing these skills and get some experience under your belt, it actually can be a great deal of fun and something that where you can be yourself. And the students will appreciate that, and you'll have a better time as a teacher. So this draws us to the conclusion of this first unit.